Welcome to the 3DownNation podcast. I'm Justin Dunk, joined by John Hodge. And man, I gotta say, when you first popped on here, Hodge, I saw the difference in like color scheme between your hat, Nordique's hat, shout out Nordique's, and your shirt. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm awake now, Hodge.
I was at the Winnipeg Gold Eyes game on Sunday, and I pulled out the Hawaiian shirt, and I thought, oh, I'll change into something more professional for the pod. And then I went, wait a minute. The podcast is all about having fun. What says fun more than a fat guy in a Hawaiian shirt? So we're here, and we're rocking the Nordique's hat. It's a grand old time. I'm missing the cheese, JC Abbott, but he will be back for picks with me later this week. And I mean, you're wearing the athleisure wear. I noticed you've kept the trend going for pod number 347 in a row. But I'm wearing the Hawaiian shirt, and I'm loving it.
We've only done 347 pods.
We've actually probably done more. That's true.
In all seriousness, no, though, you are going to get some comments, Hodge, about not wearing a CFL themed hat. You know that's coming, right?
I collect hats. I like wearing different hats. And I particularly, as of late, have enjoyed picking up hats of defunct sports teams. Like I've had the Schooners on the show. I've had the Baltimore Stallions on the show. I've got the Nordiques today, and I may or may not have another defunct Quebec-based sports team lined up for next week. So, and I've got more. And by the way, we're going to be talking about the Shreveport Pirates later on in this show. If anybody wants to buy me one, I will send you an address to send it to, but no pressure.
That's what they call a tease in the biz, Hodge. Let's get to it. We're discussing Canadian quarterback Tre Ford coming off the bench to lead the Tiger Cats to an upset.
Cody Fajardo stating the Edmonton Elks made a statement with their game and win over the Toronto Argonauts.
The BC Lions becoming arguably the second hottest team in the Canadian Football League.
The Canadian men's and women's teams winning medals at the IFAF Flag Football World Championships.
And former Canadian Football League receiver Dante Myers making quite the impressions, I should say, with the Cincinnati Bengals. But first, the Redblacks have set the record for longest losing streak in modern CFL history at, count 'em, 14 straight games dating back to the 2025 CFL season. The latest loss was a 33-21 setback in Winnipeg in Week 11. Hodge, I ask you, will Ottawa win a professional 3-down game in 2026?
Before that, it's actually 15. The previous record was 14. It got extended to 15 this past week. Sorry, I should have caught that with the question. Look, yes, of course the Ottawa Redblacks are going to win a game. I've said it previously on the show. I'll say it again. I think realistically the fewest wins you can get to in a CFL season these days. And yes, I'm aware that the Hamilton Tiger Cats went 1-17, and I believe it was 2003. But with the salary cap, right, with what we'll call it the modern way in which personnel can turn over. In other words, even back in 2003, free agents couldn't sign one-year contracts, right? There was a lot less turnover year to year. Nowadays, it's a more transient league. Fortunately, less transient than it was even 5 or 6 years ago. But the point is, it's easier to put a winning team, or at the very least, a respectable team together on a quicker timeline, I think. And roster sizes are also larger now than they were then. So it's easier to bring guys in and develop them. You're not limited in terms of, I think back in 2003, it was only 36 or 38 guys on the roster, which is crazy in hindsight. So to me, the Ottawa Redblacks are going to win. They're going to win. I still think a minimum of 3 games. That said, 0-9, like woof. And 15 games back to last season is crazy. I was at the Ottawa Redblacks hotel the day before they visited Winnipeg's stadium on Friday night, and I will say, just like looking at the energy of the team coming in, it seems okay. Ryan Dinwiddie spoke to the media for almost 10 minutes, and we peppered him with questions, and he was asked about with all the moves you guys have made, cutting Eugene Lewis, Amari Henderson, Demerio Houston, other veterans, like, do you feel at all worried as though maybe the perception of this team is that you're just focused on 2027? You're already playing for next year. And he said, well, he's like, I honestly don't really care what the narrative is outside the building. He said, all I know is inside the building. We're still focused on this year. Like, and he didn't make any excuses. He acknowledged, look, we're 0-8. We haven't been good enough, which I thought was refreshing, right? It wasn't like Ryan Dinwiddie was trying to protect his ego. At least that's not the sense I got. There was contrition there. There was admission that things have not gone well. But he very much at least feels that internally he and the rest of the coaching staff and the players believe that they can still make waves in 2026. He wasn't going to talk about playoffs, but he just said, like, we're just focused on getting that first win right now. So at least internally, the energy seems fine. The vibe seemed fine. And I didn't see bad body language in that game on Friday night, covering it in person. I didn't see a team that had rolled over. But what I saw is a team that doesn't have enough talent and loves to shoot itself in the foot. Some of those mistakes with a rookie receiver, Cade McDonald, essentially throwing the ball into the awaiting arms of Winnipeg defensive lineman David Reese. And some of the penalties that they like just unbelievable mistakes, because the Bombers made a ton of mistakes in that game too. Yet they still came away with a 12-point win. So to answer the question, yes, I think they're going to win, but this team is a mess. And unfortunately for them, they've already set a modern record with 15 straight losses. And as we just illustrated today at 3DownNation.com, at 0-9, they're also moving up the rankings for worst ever start to a season as well.
Right. There's been 8 other teams that have begun the year with 9 consecutive losses since the Canadian Football League was officially founded in 1958. I think people should know this to specify. None of those teams qualified for the playoffs. And then there were 2 teams prior to the official formation of the Canadian Football League that also lost at least 9 consecutive games to start a season. The 1952 Montreal Alouettes began 0-9, and the 1948 Hamilton Wildcats started 0-12. So the Redblacks are continuing to go deeper and deeper into a lost category, or categories, I should say, that you never want to be a part of. But what did stick out to me, Hodge, and I was curious to get your take there on the body language around the team, the coaches and the players, is that I think there is still legitimate effort from this football team, even though you have Cade McDonald making a play that's going to create laughing emojis around social media and is going to be something that people point to and say, yeah, that's so the Ottawa Redblacks in 2026. But this team is not a good football team, to put it lightly. And I honestly, Hodge, have a hard time seeing a win coming for this football team. You would think the law of averages at some point, including the football gods, might help Ottawa get a win in 2026. But I'll ask you this. Would you bet your hard-earned money on the Redblacks winning a game in 2026? Because they're going to be an underdog in every single game the rest of the way, unless you get to the end of the season and one of these teams has locked in a playoff spot and they're resting a bunch of regular starters.
Would. Now, theoretically, that could just mean one hard-earned dollar, or I guess you said plural dollars, so I guess it's a minimum of $2. Would I bet my home that they win a game? Probably not. But I do think they're going to win. And look, there's a negative and a positive here. We'll start with the negative. They've got the Montreal Alouettes in Montreal this week. The Alouettes are coming off a bye. They've won 6 straight games. They are the undisputed number 1 team of the Canadian Football League. I don't want to hear anybody say that anybody else is better. The Alouettes are the number 1 class of the league. Everyone else is a tier down as far as I'm concerned. So I don't like their chances of winning this week. But once they are done with the Montreal Alouettes this week, for the rest of this season, this team only has 4 different opponents, okay? Those opponents are BC, Toronto, Calgary, and Hamilton. In other words, they don't got to play the Riders again. They don't got to play the Elks again. They don't got to play the Alouettes again. And I think the advantage of playing not just, we'll call them the middle teams of the Canadian Football League, They obviously can't play themselves, so they can't play the bottom team of the Canadian Football League. But the advantage of playing the middle teams and playing them all twice is I think it's always easier to beat somebody, right, when you've already played them that season, right? The second game is usually a little more even. And for example, this team has a home and home with the Stampeders week 16, week 17. So like I could see them, depending on the injury to Vernon Adams Jr., which we'll talk about in a bit, but like I can see this team stealing some games late in the year is my point. And you laid it out well too. Late in the season, there could be teams resting guys, either because they've punched their ticket to the playoffs and they can't move up the standings, or because they're out of the playoff picture, right? This team has Toronto week 20, Hamilton week 21. You look at the standings right now, yeah, I think there's a decent chance that one of those teams will be eliminated by then. So I think that is working towards the Red Blacks' favor, but obviously here we're desperately looking for silver linings because things are not going well in the nation's capital.
You didn't answer my question. Would you bet hard-earned money
I said
that
yes.
the Red Blacks will win a game? You did say yes? Okay.
I said yes. Well, but
How much? A penny?
I'm kind of well. You said dollars, so I think that means I have to bet a minimum of $2. And yes, I would bet a minimum of $2. If I were to hypothetically bet, would I go up to 100? Probably. 1,000? Heck no. But I'm also a pretty conservative guy when it comes to putting money on the line. I'm not a crazy wild out there type of person that way. But yes, to answer your question, I would. It just probably wouldn't be a massive amount.
What has stood out to me outside the losses with this football team are the veteran cuts that you noted, but also how the depth chart has shifted. In particular, AJ Allen, who the Red Blacks went out and made the highest paid linebacker in the Canadian Football League to take him away from the Grey Cup champion Saskatchewan Roughriders, Hodge. And you got into the nitty-gritty of that with Allen and Dinwiddie. So what was your takeaway from that particular situation?
So Dinwiddie basically explained that they really wanted to look at Lucas Cormier at weak side linebacker. They said he's more of a sky player, which I take to mean he's a little better in coverage, right? AJ Allen is more of a box linebacker, a better pass rusher, and he is thicker, right? He's 230, 235 pounds, whereas Cormier, going back to his days at Mount Allison, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, 4 years after the fact in draft prep, I believe he did play some DB there, and he's a slimmer guy. He's 210, 215 pounds. So if that is the change in defense, and this change did coincide with the move from William Fields at defensive coordinator to Jeff Reinbold at defensive coordinator, evidently it's a style switch. And when I asked Dinwiddie if maybe in hindsight his team wishes that they had allocated their free agency dollars differently, he said, well, it's hard to say, but he did admit that maybe instead of being as active as they were, they should have relied more on the players they had in house and trusted their scouting staff more, which I took to maybe mean, okay, instead of going out and spending all this money to make AJ Allen the highest paid linebacker in the Canadian Football League, maybe we should have said, you know what? We like the scheme fit of Lucas Cormier. We like the fact that he's still developing. We like his athleticism. We like his length. And let's roll with him, right? And if it doesn't work out, let's trust that somebody else on our roster can step up. So I thought that was an intriguing answer. And as for AJ Allen, I spoke to him about it as well. And he said, first of all, I don't have any regrets about the way I handled free agency. He did his best decision, he said, with the information he had at the time. And he seems all in on the Red Blacks still. He said, even with the previous week not starting, and according to Pro Football Focus, he only played 6 defensive snaps that week, his first week on the bench. I can't imagine paying a guy $230,000 to only play him 6 snaps in a game defensively. $240,000. Thank you. And he essentially said, there's still lots I can do from the sideline. I can help get guys, help give them feedback, help, tell them things that I'm seeing, give them tips on their technique. Hey, you're tipping this, or, you need to step this way initially. Things like that as a veteran player and a student of the game. Those are things AJ Allen can do. And it should be noted, Dunk, he did play a lot more in that Winnipeg game the day after him and I spoke, and he had 2 sacks. So evidently he's still a good player, right? And he's certainly bringing it. Speaking of the sack that Cormier had, by the way, the blindside hit that Zach Collaros took, brilliantly dialed up by Jeff Reinbold. I had to use the little boys' room at halftime of that game while the Red Blacks coaching staff was walking down the hall to the elevator to get down to the visitors' locker room. And I saw Jeff Reinbold, said, "Coach, you guys got him on that blitz." And he did not turn his head to me, and he loudly grunted. But it wasn't an English word. It was just a grunt, which I don't know how to take. I thought it was a compliment. That defense was killer that first half, but I got grunted at. Regardless, AJ Allen is a very expensive backup right now, but he seems to still be all in on helping this team win games, and I think that's positive for both sides.
The other head scratching decision would be going out and making Greg Bell the highest paid American running back, and then, not really consistently running the football with him. And I think there are some people, around the league going, if you're going to give a guy that kind of money, why wouldn't you use him? And the offensive line is decent, perhaps help out Jake Maier a little bit instead of having him throw the football all the time. And I get it, the game script and flow, Ottawa has been behind for the majority of their games this season. But then to your point about AJ Allen, why not just find an American rookie running back like some of these other teams have done, like Hamilton was able to do when they let Greg Bell walk and they bring in Larry Roundtree on a rookie deal, essentially, in the Canadian Football League for like less than half the money that Greg Bell's making. So there's some roster fit issues with the players that the Red Blacks decided to sign in the offseason, and then now they're being benched. Like, some of this stuff, you just add it up and you can go, okay, I understand why this team is 0-9, but then you look at it and think Ryan Dinwiddie won 2 Grey Cups in Toronto and had a dominant football team in 2024 that probably should have competed for a Grey Cup. Do I have the year right? 2024?
23 was the year they didn't make the Grey Cup, but win 16-2. They won it all in 24, despite being very much a second fiddle all year in the East to the Alouettes.
True. So thanks for correcting me on the year there. But that's a great example. Like, people around the league will talk about Ryan Dinwiddie won a Grey Cup. Yes, it was one game with Nick Arbuckle at quarterback. And somehow, with the Ottawa Redblacks, a full off season as the head coach and general manager, and Jake Maier as a quarterback, who clearly was the guy that he wanted to bring in there and make the starter, the Red Blacks are 0-9. So there are so many reasons as to why this team is as bad as they are right now. But let's not get it twisted, Hodge. And you mentioned silver linings before. Ottawa's a bad football team.
Yeah.
And the Red Blacks have to own that. And they're not going to be given a win. It's one thing for, you to sit there and say, yeah, I'd put a toonie on this team to get one win. But the rest of the teams out here, even if the backups are in or the third stringers, aren't about to just give them one. Like, the Red Blacks have to go get it. I think that's a major factor here when we're talking about, oh yeah, like somebody will, potentially be a free space on the bingo card. Well, the Red Blacks, you alluded to this earlier, can't play themselves. And they are the free space on the win bingo card in the Canadian Football League at the moment. And it's just getting worse and worse. And full credit to our guy, JC Abbott, for not only digging up the records of the worst starts to a season in CFL history, but adding some really intriguing historical context.
By the way, the Shreveport Pirates, who the Red Blacks just broke the record for most consecutive losses in the modern Canadian Football League, lost 14 in a row to start their inaugural season. This was a team that fired its head coach in training camp, and they folded 1 year later, having all time gone 8-28. So, I mean, look, the Ottawa Redblacks, I'll just say this. Their fans deserve 100 times better than what we're seeing on the field. And it sucks seeing a TD Place Stadium on television that used to be full, 10 years ago, that now is empty or half full at best. And but at the same time, I don't really blame the fans who are staying away. Like, I get it. Canadian QB Tre Ford came off the bench to lead a fourth quarter comeback as the Tiger Cats upset the visiting Rough Riders 26-19 in Hamilton. Would the Ticats have won if Harrison Frost did not leave the game with an undisclosed injury?
honestly don't think so, Hodge. It seemed like Harrison Frost was okay in the first half. Stavros Katsantonis got a gift interception after Duncan Busby essentially bumped the football up in the air. And yes, I'm referring to volleyball for Katsantonis to come up with. And then Harrison Frost took advantage on a throw to Myron Mitchell. Mitchell beat Lacombo in coverage. Nelson Lacombo had a rough night for the Riders at Hamilton Stadium. But after that, I thought he was kind of meh. But then when Tre Ford came off the bench to start the second half and people were wondering what was going on with Frost and the undisclosed injury, I thought that added some real juice. And it's one thing for the Riders to say, yeah, we might have spent a little bit of time on Tre Ford, but it's very clear they were expecting, for the most part, Harrison Frost. And I think that changed a lot of the momentum in the football game. When you look at it, it was really the fourth quarter that was the issue for the Riders and the reason why Ford was able to stage that comeback. Reels off 16 unanswered points, including an unbelievable, otherworldly half roll, step up in the pocket, be willing to get punished because there was a handful of Riders defenders around, I believe, if I remember the play properly, and then throw an absolute strike to Carrick Wheatfall, who he makes an unbelievably athletic play, Supermaning to get that football. Unreal all around for a 41-yard touchdown that ultimately tied the game, the extra point, put the Tiger Cats ahead for good. They added a couple field goals late to have the result 26-19. But make no mistake, Tre Ford entering that ball game, I felt like changed the entire complexion of it. And Scott Milanovic going into it had some nice things to say about Harrison Frost and how he felt like even a little bit he reminded him of Trevor Harris in terms of his playing style. But I think there's still some questions to be answered in Hamilton about who should be the starting quarterback going forward, because like Harrison Frost has been okay. But what I did like to hear from just a quarterback development perspective were a couple things. Tre Ford owning his benching post-game, saying he didn't really care what the outside world was saying about it. And then Scott Milanovic talking about Tre Ford preparing diligently during the week, even as the backup. Especially, I think he noted his mental reps. So perhaps there is an evolution there with Ford as a quarterback that he is going to be ready to be put in the game at a moment's notice here and be prepared to produce from the jump when he gets in there.
Well, and there's also like kind of a factor at play here where even dating back a few years, for whatever reason, Tre Ford seems to be the Saskatchewan Roughriders kryptonite. Tre Ford is 2-0 as a starter against the Riders. And he came into this game, and I agree. I thought Harrison Frost looked relatively sharp. He calls himself a timing passer, and I absolutely see that. And I think the comp to Trevor Harris makes a lot of sense, right? Delivering the ball on time and accurately is how Trevor Harris has had a 30-year career in this league, right? That is the way that Harrison Frost has played in limited reps here with the Hamilton Tiger Cats. But he doesn't have electric ability with his legs. And obviously that is what Tre Ford does best. Now, on the flip side, Tre Ford has struggled at times. Every time I've seen him play this year, he's missed at least one very easy outlet throw. You kind of go, okay, accuracy-wise, interesting. There have been times where he's tried to buy time and been unsuccessful to do anything with it. But the very best of Tre Ford is that throw you highlighted, Justin, the 41-yarder to Carrick Wheatfall. Absolutely unbelievable play from Tre, and unbelievable play as well from the man they call Wheat down the field. He didn't catch the second one. That was the easier catch later in the game that he dropped, but he caught the first one, which was unbelievable. To me, I mean, if the question is Frost or Ford, my answer is going to be Ford or Fost. I think using both quarterbacks is better than using either quarterback, if that makes sense. I think these are two quarterbacks who play the game completely differently, but both have bought in. And I've been hearing behind the scenes the same things that Scott Milanovic said publicly about Tre Ford. Tre Ford is in the building early. He's absolutely working his tail off and he's staying late. And I think there were some concerns about that when Tre was in Edmonton. I've been led to believe that in Hamilton, he has been the consummate professional and really earned the respect of his teammates. So for me, I think moving forward, if you're the Tiger Cats, you're kind of in treading water mode for the rest of the year, just by definition of having your Hall of Fame quarterback on injured reserve and extremely unlikely to be back this year. So why not use both young quarterbacks? If you can have two for the price of one and mix and match and roll with the hot hand, you do it. Like I think you want one guy optimally, but your one guy was Bo Levi Mitchell. He's not walking through that door right now. So why not use Bo?
If you're the Hamilton Tiger Cats too, with this win, you can legitimately be thinking about protecting that crossover playoff spot and getting in to the CFL playoffs, especially when you consider, Hodge, their next three games are against Toronto, Calgary, and then Toronto in the Labor Day Classic. And yes, there's obviously a schedule to be played after that, but you're playing the Calgary Stampeders, who right now, other than Ottawa, have the worst record in the Canadian Football League. And then your rivals in the Argos, whose defense has been up and down. Chad Kelly's thrown some picks, and the Ticats defense has looked really stout. To me, yes, Tre Ford's going to get all the headlines, especially for that unbelievable play to Carrick Wheatfall, and Wheatfall deserves some praise as well. But the Tiger Cats defense was a major reason why Hamilton was still in that football game and even had a chance to come back. So I'm very intrigued to see what the Tiger Cats do at the quarterback position, because I thought that half from Tre Ford, honestly, without some hyperbole, Hodge, and trying to not have recency bias kick in, might have been the best half of football that we've seen him play. From a decision-making standpoint, the ball was not put in harm's way. He ran only when it was really needed, or he felt like he didn't like the picture down the field or didn't feel comfortable letting the ball go based on the coverage he was seeing. And I thought overall, as much as people were getting on him for that awful interception in Montreal a few weeks back, and make no mistake, it was a bad one, that we need to call it out when we see it, that Ford made a lot of smart decisions. Now, we don't know what the primary reads or second or third reads were on those plays, so it's harder to get into some of those details. But from a decision-making standpoint, I can't remember a pass, Hodge, and you correct me if I'm wrong, that Tre Ford threw in that game where you went, well, that could have been picked.
Oh, yeah, I didn't see one in that game. And I'm thrilled that you brought up the defense, because I do think that the Tiger Cats quietly over the last 6 games have had one of the CFL's best defenses. You could even make an argument they're number one. I've gone back and I keep track of a number of metrics for each game. These are some passing numbers. So dating back to week 6, the first time that Hamilton and Saskatchewan met this year, Trevor Harris only threw for 211 yards in that game. The next week, Hamilton gave up 322 yards to Chad Kelly, a little more than league average, but the Tiger Cats did win that game. The next week, they kept Davis Alexander to a $187. No other team in the CFL has limited Davis Alexander pretty much at all this year. The Ticats were brilliant that game. The next week, they gave up 252 yards to Vernon Adams Jr. They did have a bad game this past week, 370 yards to Nathan Rourke, though, I mean, he is the reigning MOP for goodness sakes. And then they just gave up 207 to Trevor Harris in that win. So that's a 6-game streak with 4 fantastic results, a decent result against the Argonauts, and then, yeah, the one bad game against BC. But those are still pretty special numbers. It should also be noted that over those 6 games, they only gave up 100 yards rushing in 2 of them, and none of their last 3. So it's not even like, okay, they're a really good pass defense, but man, they're getting eaten alive on the ground. No, this is a defense that is balanced, and they're doing a good job forcing takeaways. This team won the turnover battle against Saskatchewan, but they also won it against BC in week 10 and won it against Montreal in week 8. Now, they didn't win those games, but if you're forcing takeaways and winning that turnover battle, you usually do win. So I think that bodes well for the coming weeks, especially now with the Tiger Cats having a bit of a softer schedule over the next few weeks. They've got Toronto twice and Calgary once. No disrespect to those teams, but I'm happy to play them if the alternative is Saskatchewan and Montreal a whole bunch of time.
And you look at that fourth quarter, I noted it for Tre Ford and the 16 unanswered points to come back and get the win. The Ticats defense forced 3 2-and-outs and got a pick to seal the game. Now, you could say, okay, Trevor Harris trying to make something happen, threw it into coverage. There was a whole bunch of Ticats defenders around Dell Duncan Busby, who was his intended target. But the Ticats defense turned the lights out on the Rough Riders. And if we flip it around and look at the Saskatchewan Rough Riders in this game, lacked energy really throughout. It seemed like they were in control up 19-10 in that third quarter. But then the fourth quarter was completely different. The offense could not stay on the field, and the defense was struggling to contain Tre Ford, whether it was him throwing the football or him taking off and running it. Like, Tre Ford's numbers were really good just to hammer it home. 13 of 17 for 151 and a touchdown in a half of football. And then he ran it 4 times for 38 yards. But I didn't think he forced anything there. He didn't carry the football like a loaf of bread, like we saw him try to hurl over a defender and then had the ball ripped away. Scott Milanovic didn't like. I think that was the initial time when Harrison Frost was put into the football game for the Ticats and Ford was shown the bench. So he made some really good decision making, but this game was there for the taking for the Riders in the fourth quarter, even though they did not play very well. I think it was probably like a C performance. It wasn't atrociously bad. It just wasn't good enough to beat a Ticats team that has a really stout defense and perhaps caught a little bit of lightning in the bottle from Tre Ford. But Tre Ford looked really good. If he can stack some of those performances together, I think he could be a legitimate starting quarterback in the Canadian Football League. But the trouble is, you got to go out and do it. That's the key as a professional. If you want to be a franchise QB, you need to be able to have these performances, not just for a half, but game in and game out. And yes, there's going to be highs and lows, but it seems like at least for a half here, Tre Ford cut out all the lows. Veteran quarterback Cody Fajardo said Edmonton produced a statement win. Yes, those words actually came out of his mouth over the Argonauts, 42-12 in Week 11 at Commonwealth Stadium. The 2023 Grey Cup MVP claimed the Elks are a great team. Do you agree with him, Huh?
I mean, to an extent, like, is beating the Argonauts a statement game? Like, the Argonauts, they're not a doormat, but there's a lot of work to be done there. I think, particularly with their run game, which has been non-existent at times this year, mediocre at best at others. The Argonauts have also really struggled with giveaways against everybody else. Well, that very much continued. The Elks entered this game number 1 in the CFL in takeaways with 25. They got 6 more. 31 takeaways through 10 games is unbelievable, an average of 3.1 per game. So I think people knew that the Elks were really good. I still think the Elks are really good. Their recent 2-game skid did nothing to dissuade me of that. They lost a nail biter to the Saskatchewan Roughriders, another really good team. And then they got their doors blown off a bit by the Alouettes. But it's the Alouettes, right? That's not a concerning loss for me at all. So I wasn't selling the Elks, if anything. And if you watched our picks week or listened to our picks this past week that I did with Andrew McKinnis, I was thrilled to get the Elks. And I think it was just -3.5, maybe it was 5.5, but regardless, I'll check my notes here. It was Elks -3.5. Yeah. So I was thrilled to get the Elks -3.5. They won the game by 30. I didn't think they were going to win it by 30, but I did think that they were going to win this game, and I didn't expect it to be particularly close. So I love the confidence from Cody Fajardo, and you pointed it out. He's a Grey Cup MVP. So I don't think he's talking out of his rear end when he's talking about being a great team or what it takes to be a great team. Like, this guy has been there. He's done it all. He's been in this league for a long time. So I get what Cody is saying, but I think maybe the Elks, in a way, and don't get me wrong, teams do this in professional sports constantly, but I almost feel like they're trying to keep this narrative alive that nobody believes in them, that they're the underdog. Nobody. And it's like, guys, did you look at the picks? Everybody picked you to win this week. It's like, hey, not just our publication, like 90% of the pundits are behind you. But hey, if internally you want to pretend that everybody thinks you suck and you can't win and you can't do anything and you guys are just a bunch of fools, then hey, if it helps win games, keep doing it, because that's what you get paid to do. And it's worked so far.
Cody Fajardo does know how to motivate the football teams he plays on. We saw it with the video that came out after the Alouettes won the Grey Cup in 2023, an impassioned speech that not a lot of us thought might come from Fajardo behind the scenes. And I think this is similar. It's not impassioned and he's not screaming and yelling and swearing, but he's giving confidence to the rest of his team with this statement. He talked about it leading into the game and even as they were going through the stretch that it was kind of like a mini Grey Cup playing Saskatchewan and Montreal back to back. With Saskatchewan being at home, a hypothetical West final, I believe is what he was getting at. And then, you don't go on the road to play a Grey Cup, but playing Montreal. And I actually thought that was an interesting comparison to what Edmonton could face in the playoffs because that could certainly play out. But his perspective, part of it at least, was also we played the two other top teams in the Canadian Football League. And we've said it on the podcast, at least for a couple, if not a few weeks or more, Hodge, that we're all in agreement. Edmonton, Saskatchewan, Montreal are the top three teams in the Canadian Football League. There's no argument right now that the Alouettes are the top team. And the Owls absolutely took it to Edmonton at Percival Molson Stadium in Week 10. So this was a key bounce-back win. And Chad Kelly's a gunslinger. We've seen him get it going with the Toronto Argonauts. So I thought overall this was an impressive performance. But I think Cody Fajardo's message was one of confidence to his football team. And I don't think, though, I would go as far to say as the Edmonton Elks are a great team. Great teams are teams that have won championships or that are contending for multiple championships, in my opinion, right? We're just talking about differences in a definition here. Do I think Edmonton has been great through 10 games? Yeah, I think you could convince me of that. But if we're talking about them being talked about in CFL history as one of the great teams, they have to go and win a Grey Cup. Otherwise, people are not necessarily going to forget this season from a CFL perspective. I think in Edmonton, the fans will remember it, a big turnaround season, especially if they keep it going and potentially host the West Final. But great teams for me are reserved for the ones that win Grey Cups, go to multiple Grey Cups, like the Winnipeg Blue Bombers recently did, right? Going to 5 Grey Cups in a row. That's a great team. That's when you can start the dynasty talk. So that's where I think this message was one of confidence to his football team. But the Elks do look really good, and a sign of resilience, I think, helps build you into the great teams that Fajardo's talking.
Well, you heard it here first, Edmonton. Justin Dunk thinks you suck and he hates you. That's what I heard from that.
If you need the motivation, feel free to use it.
I do want to add quickly, and Cody Fajardo, fair enough, is passing the glory off to his team, which is great. And they have a lot of great players. Their offensive line has been very good despite some injuries. I love what Joshua, I've heard it said Cephas and Cephas. I should probably clarify with the team. TJ Luther have really stepped up in that receiving core and built that unit up. We all know Austin Mack's a good player. We all know that, Brandon O'Leary-Orange can pop off from time to time. Keon Julian Grant's a great athlete, but that receiving core is flushed out. We know, obviously, that Justin Rankin's a great player. And defensively, they've been exceptional at taking the ball away. That defensive line, I thought Malik Carney embarrassed, frankly, the Toronto Argonauts, 2 starting tackles at times in that game. But, and Vincent Blanchard, we should talk about him as well, the place kicker who's been sensational this year. But I think Cody deserves more credit. This is a guy who's only 1 touchdown short of his season high. He's never thrown more than 18 touchdown passes in a season. He's at 17 right now. And the other stat I love here is he's averaging 9.3 yards per attempt this season. That is also a career high. His previous career high was 9.1, set in 2019 when he led the Riders to a first-place finish and a West Final appearance. So I think the QB, who at the age of 34 is playing arguably the best football of his career, deserves some credit, though I know Cody, being a team guy, probably doesn't want to talk about that.
And ripped off the longest run in his CFL career.
Yeah,
44 yards. Looking spry at 34.
Retirement this offseason. He was like, I might not play football again. I might just do some coaching. We'll see. So, yeah, credit to him. Frankly, I didn't think Cody Fajardo had it in him to take a step beyond this year. And I remember when you sat down with Justin Rankin pre the season back in March, Justin, and Justin Rankin, I believe his exact words, because you were asking about how many receiving yards he could have. He said, "Well, I'm playing with Cody Fajardo, Mr. Checkdown," I think was the exact quote. So this is a guy who was called Mr. Checkdown by a teammate 6 months ago and is now legitimately in the running for West Division MOP. I don't think he's in the running for league-wide MOP. That's going to be between Davis Alexander and Tyson Philpott, barring a crazy turnaround. But right now, you could absolutely argue that Cody Fajardo is the best player in the West Division, hands down.
Fajardo's playing great ball, man. And don't get it twisted with what I'm saying about the Edmonton Elks, okay? He's playing really, really good football, borderline great football. Now, through 10 games, he's averaging over 310 yards passing per game, but that still doesn't put him in the league lead, as you said, with Davis Alexander having a great season. But Fajardo's playing high-level football, and I think it's really helped open up this offense to have Austin Mack there, a guy he clearly trusts throwing the football down the field, but also TJ Luther. And then there was a little nugget that Fajardo shared post-game too when he was talking about Brendan O'Leary-Orange, and that O'Leary-Orange actually lives in Reno, I think he said, if I get the city right out there in Nevada, and that they were throwing a bunch together. And while O'Leary-Orange was a free agent, he called up Ed Hervey and said, "Ed, we got to sign this guy. Like, he's big, he can move, he's fast." And look what's come to fruition. Brendan O'Leary-Orange, albeit under the radar, has, I think, been a key contributor for the Elks, especially on second down. And I think it's really helped this offense evolve under Jordan Maksimic. So Cody Fajardo playing really good football and also protecting the football. Only 5 interceptions through 10 games.
Yeah, I don't know where O'Leary-Orange lives during the offseason, and I don't believe Cody Fajardo and Brendan O'Leary-Orange overlapped there, but they did both absolutely play collegiately at the University of Nevada. So that would totally make sense that they are able to be in close contact during the offseason down there. Canadian QB Nathan Rourke threw for 301 yards and 2 touchdowns to help the Lions win the team's 3rd game in a row and leapfrog Calgary in the West Division standings. Besides the Montreal Alouettes, is BC the hottest team in the CFL?
I guess the better wording would be the second hottest team, but the answer is yes. And there was so much talk and pressure, and the seat was getting hot there for Mike Benavides to start the season with the way the defense began early on. But they have turned it around and become arguably the stingiest defense in the Canadian Football League. The numbers are going to be skewed from earlier in the season, but it seems like it's the toughest defense to run against at this point in the season. The secondary has played much better football. It obviously helps when you get your franchise guy, your $700,000 man, Nathan Rourke, back behind center. But yes, BC is the second hottest team in the Canadian Football League. And to think that there were some people kind of writing this team off after the slow start and with Rourke out with the left shoulder injury, and now it seems like they're rising in the West Division, which is a tough division to climb from the bottom, where BC was last week prior to the win against Calgary, and get up there in legitimate playoff contention. Yes, there's still a shot for a crossover there, a long way to go before that's decided, but BC has looked really good. And Hodge, it's wild, and I think a great example of how quickly professional football can come at you. When James Butler is not on the roster 1 week, Xander Horvath takes full advantage of his opportunity, and yes, Caden Salter helped open up some of those running lanes with his dual threat abilities, and then all of a sudden, it seems like Horvath, potentially, at least at this point, is the better back and is getting more touches than James Butler, who we know that Nathan Rourke likes. So that, I think, says something about how quickly things can change in professional football. BC looks really good right now. The receiving group has gotten healthier. If JC Abbott was here, he would go on and on and on about the BC Lions. So we'll do it succinctly. But they are a hot team right now in the Canadian Football League, especially with Rourke getting more and more comfortable after coming back from being out with injury.
Yes, and I mean, the receiving core is part of it, right? Like, this receiving core was unbelievably decimated by injury early this season. They're still not fully healthy, but they do at least have 4 of their 5 projected preseason starters In the starting lineup, that's Keon Hatcher, Stanley Berryhill, Justin McInnis, and Javon Katoy. That has boosted this unit. And look, this team is still banged up. They're without a number of projected starters. They brought Lorenzo Malden IV out of retirement, right? For goodness sakes, like, they're beat up, but they're playing good football right now. And yes, their last 3 wins haven't exactly come against titans of this league right now. They beat the Blue Bombers, they beat Hamilton, and then they narrowly beat the Stampeders. But we are about to get some bigger, better tests for this team. Week 12, they've got Sask, they've got Saskatchewan again in week 17, and then they've got a home and home with the Montreal Alouettes in there as well, week 14, week 15. So 4 of their next 5 games are against 2 of the CFL's big dogs, but it would not shock me if the BC Lions held their own, we'll say, in those games, or dare I say more than hold their own in those games. This team has shown, I think at this point, and proved that 0-3 start, that 1-5 start was a blip. Yes, the defense was an absolute travesty the first few games, but they have been among the league's best defenses the last few weeks. That unit is playing at a high level. And offensively, I think a lot of the early season struggles were very much injury related. Like we talked about, the injuries to the receiving core. This was a team by week 2. Keon Hatcher was out. Stanley Berryhill was out. Javon Katoy was out. Let's not forget their first round pick, Nate Demontiak, was out. Like, this is a unit that was absolutely devastated. So offensively, they're getting healthy. Defensively, they've improved dramatically. And I mean, they're fine on special teams. They don't blow the doors off for me that way, but they're rock solid. And that formula has been working for them. So to answer the question, they're absolutely the second hottest team in the Canadian Football League, but the tests are going to be tougher for the next little bit.
You know what was eerily similar, Hodge? Tre Ford's throw to Carrick Wheatfall and Nathan Rourke's throw to Jermaine Jackson. Now, Jackson didn't have to make a diving grab, but those plays, when you look at them stacked on top of each other or side by side, look like it's almost the same play. A little bit different result at the end, but it was pretty cool. And then you also have the fact that both are, of course, near and dear to my heart, Canadian quarterbacks making those kind of big time plays.
You mentioned James Butler, by the way, and he's one of the running backs on my fantasy team, which has been a disaster for the Hodge team. So I picked up him in the second round. That turned up to be a bust of a pick. Samuel Emelis was a steal in round 3, but he's been out. So I'm thinking of firing my fantasy GM, honestly. Awful.
Did anybody ask about your fantasy team? I missed that.
No, but I know you love the updates, so I had to do it.
Wait. Can you fire yourself as GM? Is that possible?
That was the joke.
Are you saying that's what the Ottawa Redblacks should do with Ryan Dinwiddie?
Well, here's the thing, okay? Like, I've had people ask me this question publicly and privately, and the CFL operations cap is not good. I think we on this podcast are in agreement on that, and any person you talk to, really on or off the record, right? This was a question posed at Grey Cup, for instance, to Corey Mace and Jason Moss, the 2 head coaches in last year's Grey Cup, and they both want to get rid of it. That makes sense. The operations cap, for those who aren't familiar, literally limits how many coaches you can hire and how much they can be paid. So obviously, if you're a coach, you want to hire more people on your staff, and you want to not only pay them more, but also get paid more yourself. So it's an unpopular thing. And I would agree that it limits the growth of the league, the entertainment value of the league. But one nice thing that it does is, for years and years and years, whether it was Kahari Jones getting fired in Montreal, I think about 6 years ago now, whether it was the early season firing of Jeff Tedford, or maybe he left the Lions of his own volition. But regardless, there are early season firings in this league. And the media narrative sometimes is, well, it's a real shame that that person didn't get more time because, it's a results now business. And if only we weren't so focused on getting it done today, this coach might have had success. So one silver lining of the ops cap is that guys actually do generally get time to prove whether or not they can do the job, right? Ryan Dinwiddie's in year one of, I believe it's a 3-year contract as the head coach and GM of the Ottawa Redblacks. And he is making a ton of money. He is going to make that money whether or not he is working the job. In other words, the Redblacks are paying him through 2028 one way or another. And I think doing that, like firing him and paying him out and buying him out, is going to, or would hypothetically, be an absolute disaster for that team against the cap, right? You can't pay Ryan Dinwiddie off and then hire somebody brand new and say, oh yeah, by the way, the staff that was put together by Ryan Dinwiddie, you're now stuck with all of them because we can't also fire everybody else. And actually, Ryan Dinwiddie did keep a lot of incumbents in Ottawa, I think partly because they were under contract and that was just part of the gig. It's like, yeah, we'll hire you to be the head coach and GM, but you can't bring in all your own guys. He brought in some of his guys from Toronto, but he didn't bring in all of his guys. So I think for better or worse, Ryan Dinwiddie is absolutely safe for the rest of the season. And he might even be safe well into next season just because of the operations cap. So again, there's a lot of negative to the operations cap, but one positive for coaches is they have more runway. And I do think there's an argument to be made that maybe it's just inherently good that coaches get more time, because if you're being hired as a head coach in any league, certainly a league like the Canadian Football League, it's because a team really believes in you, right? And we did see it in past generations where a guy would get hired. Oh, you started 1-4, okay, you're out, right? That doesn't happen anymore. So I don't think that Ryan Dinwiddie's job is in jeopardy right now, and possibly even into next year. Though we'll see if they go 0-18, which I still think is impossible, but if it happens, maybe. But the ops cap really, really inhibits what you can do.
Vernon Adams Jr. left Calgary's loss against the BC Lions in Week 11 with what general manager and head coach Dave Dickinson confirmed post-game was a head injury. The Stampeders are on a bye week, but if VA misses time, how do you expect the team to fare in his absence?
First of all, our best to VA, right, as he recovers from this injury. It sucked watching him go down. This was not a dirty hit. Like, this was just a football play, and football is a dangerous game. So we wish him the best in getting better. Head injuries are no laughing matter. And I mean, we'd obviously wish any player the best, but especially quarterbacks, right? Vernon Adams Jr. has played at a very high level this season, and the league needs its best players to be on the field. And so we wish him the best. Now, in terms of what the Stampeders could look like, and you mentioned that Calgary's going into a bye. We don't know if VA is going to miss time. It seems possible he could be back as soon as post-bye, but maybe he won't. In the case that he's not, I do have some serious concerns about how this team will look. This team's only backup with really any experience is Josh Love. He came into last game. And by the way, when you Google Josh Love, it tries to autofill Josh Love Island, because I guess the show Love Island has a Josh on it. I've never seen Love Island. I was just very confused momentarily when I searched Josh Love and realized that Google had filled in an extra word for me. But regardless, Josh Love was a collegiate standout at San Jose State. He was the Mountain West MVP in 2019. But you'll notice I said 2019, and that is because Josh Love is no spring chicken. He will turn 30 years old next month. So if you see Josh Love out there, please know this is not a project. He is not a developmental player. He is a guy who's in his 7th year of professional football. He bounced around with a number of NFL teams, didn't see any regular season action, but did play a ton in the spring league, in the UFL, and various spring leagues, I should say, with a bunch of spring teams. So he looked okay in those leagues, a career kind of, 1-to-1 touchdown interception ratio guy. Through 16 regular season CFL games, he is 11 of 18 for 125 yards and a pick. And that pick, of course, came to seal that loss to BC when TJ Lee read Love like a book and jumped that route at the end zone. So to me, I have concerns about how the Stampeders will fare without VA. I hope, frankly, that Josh Love proves me wrong and proves that he can be the next star up and coming quarterback in the Canadian Football League. But this was a team going into the season that I thought that might be behind the starter, just taking the backups into account. That might be the least depth anybody has under center. And that is certainly going to be tested over the foreseeable future in Cowtown again, if VA turns out not to be able to play.
Man, it's going to be a struggle. I think if Vernon Adams Jr. is out of the lineup. That said, Josh Love looked okay and almost had his team guided to a win over BC late, but then threw the pick. So he's definitely not going to be Vernon Adams Jr., but there might be some upside. I just find it hard to think, okay, if Calgary, struggled here through this latest stretch to win some football games with Vernon Adams Jr., who had a great touchdown to interception ratio, how are they going to fare with Love, as you mentioned, who is what he's going to be, essentially? Is there some upside there as a starter with him to be realized? There's a possibility because we haven't seen him on the field as a starting quarterback yet for Calgary, but it's just not going to be Vernon Adams Jr. So I think the Stampeders could struggle, but also perhaps Love can use that age and experience to his benefit if indeed he does become the starter to try to help the Stampeders stay out of the West Division basement.
Canada's women's flag football team beat the United States of America 27-20 in the IFAF World Championships gold medal game on Sunday in Germany. Meanwhile, the Canadian men recorded a 34-26 overtime win against Mexico to claim bronze. Even more importantly, both teams have clinched a spot in the 2028 Summer Olympic Games in Los Angeles, where flag football will be played for the very first time. What do those results say about Canadian football?
Canada can compete with anybody, men or women, in the entire world on the flag football gridiron for sure. You look at the women, for instance, beating the US of A, the big, bad US of A. Quarterback Sarah Parker doing her thing, 104 passing yards. Frederic Morneau, hopefully I'm saying that properly, 3 touchdowns. Team captain Caroline Mulquin-Jobert, 10 receptions, 30 yards, 1 touchdown in the win. If you want to see a one-on-one interview with her, check it out on our YouTube channel or our podcast feed leading into the tournament. Very well spoken. And it marked the first title at the World Championship level for the Canadian women since 2014 and third since IFAF started holding the event in 2022. So full marks for Canada for, as you mentioned, punching their ticket to the LA Games, but also capturing bronze. And, at least for my money, this makes Canada the favorite on the women's side to go into LA and compete for that gold medal at the Olympics. And then you look at what the men's flag football team was able to do, getting an overtime win over Mexico. And you got a former NFL tight end in Anthony Auclair, who talked to 3DownNation leading into the World Championships and told us that he lost about 40 to 45 pounds to become a legitimate receiver in the flag football game. Yes, he's gone from essentially a blocking tight end who can catch in the NFL to a receiver in flag football and scoring the game-winning touchdown and 2-point convert to put Canada into the Olympic Games. Auclair had 12 receptions for 59 yards with 2 scores in the game to lead the way for Canada. Daniel Peterman, former Winnipeg Blue Bomber Hodge and CFL receiver, hauled in 2 touchdowns. And James Drysdale added 1 score, posted 7 grabs for 40 yards. He was electric in this tournament for Canada, ripping off some highlight reel plays. There's one that stood out to me specifically. I think it was in their first game where he juked out, I think it was like 3 players, and then showed his speed down the sideline and took it to the house. So yes, it was that upset of number 2 Australia. I think that Drysdale got that done. Go check that play out. Great athleticism. And there's got to be some excitement there from Paul Lapalisse, former CFL head coach, who is now overseeing the men's national flag football team, to have the opportunity and I think for both teams actually, now where you can say, okay, we're already into the Olympics, we can start planning ahead. But the flip side of that, Hodge, is if I'm Michael O'Connor, Anthony Auclair, Marc-Antoine Dequoy, and I'm using the names that the majority of people will know, I think it's important also to drop the names of perhaps the lesser known players on these teams, like a James Drysdale or Sarah Parker, the quarterback for the women's national team. If you're these players, specifically on the men's side, are you sitting there wondering, if you're Michael O'Connor, well, is Nathan Rourke going to come in here and take my spot? Like, I just helped this team win a bronze medal at the World Championships. Same thing among the receivers and defensive backs. Is Tyson Philpott going to come and play? Is Tyrell Ford going to come and be a defensive back? Like, is Tre Ford going to, come and take a spot away from Jackson Tuchinski, who got a look in the CFL as a receiver and was a star quarterback at the University of Manitoba? So it's great on one hand that these players, specifically on the men's side, were able to get the job done. But you got to wonder if now some of that goes through their heads. Like, it's the difficult side of sports and ultimately going for that win and trying to get a gold medal at the Olympic Games, which no one thought was ever possible when they first started playing football up until now, that flag football is at the LA 2028 Games. But I started thinking about that after, that it was so great that these athletes, again, especially on the men's side, were able to get it done for Canada and not have to go through some of the other routes to qualify for the Olympics. But there's also the flip side of that. And especially as a coach too, Paul Appolice is going to have a difficult decision-making process because he's been with some of these players now, I believe it is, for over a year, if not longer, trying to get this team in the shape that it needed to be to get that ticket to the Olympic Games.
Well said. And to not have to worry about the 2 qualification events that are happening in 2027, I think is fantastic for these 2 programs. And obviously, congratulations to both of these teams. Amazing. I will say the process you're talking about on the men's side has already happened to some extent. There were players on this team before. Marc-Antoine Dequoy, for instance, turned his attention to flag football. Jackson Tuchinski turned his attention to flag football, who were there and helped this team get in a position to qualify for the World Championships, who then didn't make the World Championship roster, which is unfortunate. But it is the nature of sports. As for what the CFL potential or NFL potential is for guys to then make this team, I think that's a story for 2027 going into 2028. For right now, I just think this is super cool. I was at the Winnipeg Sea Bears game on Saturday where they won the CEBL championship. I was sitting with my niece and nephew. They're 10 years old. They play flag football. They love it. In particular, it's my niece's favorite sport. And it was so cool to be able to tell her, hey, you know what the Olympics is? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, did you know that in 2028, there's going to be flag football at the Olympics? And she was like, no. And I said, well, and guess which team just qualified to go? And she's like, I don't know. And I'm like, the Canadian women are going to play at the Olympics in 2028. And she thought, and my nephew thought that was the coolest thing ever. Now, the men hadn't qualified at that point. It was still Saturday afternoon. Of course, I'm now able to tell them that the men are going too. And so they, as kids who grew up in a flag football world, Justin, you and I would not have grown up with flag football being popular. It is much more popular now. They are already 2 years out, super excited to see these teams compete. And I'd imagine there's a lot of Canadian kids learning that information and getting excited as well, because of course the flag game is the most popular it's ever been by a lot. It's always existed, right? It's always been around, but more people are playing it in this country than ever before. And I think that's awesome. So as someone who has always much preferred the Winter Olympics to the Summer Olympics, I now feel more excited for the 2028 Summer Olympics than I ever have. So I'm excited, and I know a lot of other people are. And who knows, Justin, maybe we'll have to go to LA and cover the whole darn thing. How does that sound?
Take out the maybe.
Just don't make me run the 100-meter dash. For the love of God, don't make me run the 100-meter dash. I'm not doing it.
There's no doubt, though, Hodge, that flag football is growing quickly. It seems like around the world, but especially in Canada. And I hesitate to say this kind of stuff, but back in my day when I was playing football, coming up as a kid, touch football was, a decently big thing, at least in Guelph and from what I heard from some other cities. But flag football has exploded. Like, to me, it's like basketball on grass, and it's so cool where you can have these small teams that become really tight, like 10 or 12 players, similar. I believe there were 12-player rosters at the World Championships. I think it's only going to be 10-player rosters for the Olympics, which condenses it down even more to how many players can be on that Olympic roster. But you can see it just exploding everywhere. I've been to multiple tournaments and just seen the scenes that are set up there with the music and the interaction, and boys and the girls and the men and the women competing essentially on the same stage and against each other, and all the colors. Like, it lends itself well to social media. So I think it's been smart for the CFL to get behind it. Obviously the NFL has been behind it for a number of years now, and one of the coolest things to come out of the women winning gold especially is seeing the NFL, largely an American football league, right? Like, I know they go play the international games, but all the teams are based in America, tweeting about Canada beating the United States in flag football. Like, that to me was cool. The NFL Twitter account, I think, has like millions upon millions of followers. So when you start to show that even though we are a much smaller country from a population size, that we can compete with the United States of America at their game and beat them at it, I think it's pretty cool. And I hope Pat McAfee takes note that the Canadian women got it done over the U.S. women and are coming for that gold medal in the U.S. of A.
And if I can take off my professional hat for a moment, I'll just ask, how you like them apples? Put a tariff on that. Okay, I'll put it back on now.
Somebody's going to say in the comments, Hodge, stick to football.
It was only 2 seconds.
The NFL Twitter account has over 36 million followers, just for those that are wondering.
That's amazing.
And I saw that and went, that's pretty cool. They're playing it unbiased, giving their props to the Canadian women for doing their thing on the world stage. And Hodge, I got to say also that for the people that might not have tuned into the games, go to the Football Canada YouTube page, go to the IFAF YouTube page, check out social media, because some of the plays that were made in these games, like, they're all great athletes, but when you look at the highlight reel plays, are ultra athletic. The game's highly entertaining. It moves at a fast pace. There's a 25-second play clock. It looks a little unique with what some of the teams do in terms of the laterals, but it is a very cool form of football that is, quite honestly, like, just evolving and exploding in front of our eyes. And I think it's only going to get bigger and bigger now in our country and other countries with flag football, as you alluded to, telling your niece, Hodge, being in the Olympics. And it was similar for my nephews. They were asking for updates throughout the tournament. Well, has Canada qualified for the Olympics now? So then we explained the qualification process, and they were following it, and they were watching some plays and perhaps implementing that with their flag football team. So it's just a really cool sport, inclusive, all the rest. Congrats to the Canadian teams, both of them, men and the women, qualifying for the Olympics in LA in 2028. And yes, Hodge, if 3DownNation is still around then, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, we going, bro. Maybe all three of us.
That'd be sick. And the other thing I like about these games too, like, sitting down for a 3-hour football game can be a commitment. These games are only an hour long. So if you got an hour to kill, pop it up on YouTube. Super fun to watch. Now, time for Hodge's heritage moment. On this day in 2019, Ottawa's Lewis Ward missed a 34-yard field goal, ending his streak of consecutive field goals at 69. The previous professional football record was held by NFL legend Adam Vinatieri at 45, and he's now been inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame just recently. Ward was named the CFL's Most Outstanding Special Teams Player and Most Outstanding Rookie in 2018, as well as a League All-Star. The Ottawa product also set a CFL record for single-season field goal accuracy that year, connecting on 51 of 52 attempts. That's 98.1%. Do you ever see this record being broken, Justin?
Man, kickers are getting so good that, honestly, I do think at some point this streak is going to be broken. But I'll add a little wrinkle here. If you're the Ottawa Redblacks, we talked about how bad they've been this season. They're 0-9. let's just make things right again, okay? Lewis Ward can be your kicker for the rest of the season. Trade Brett Lawther back to Saskatchewan. He's been perfect on the season. Solve those kicking woes, and everybody will be happy. Rider Nation would love it. I'm just saying, I think that's the way that it should be, and the Redblacks could get some sort of asset or assets for Brett Lawther with the way he's been kicking the football. I'm curious to see if it happens. Alex Hale did go 4 for 4. I get it. But I think it could make for a very intriguing twist in Riderville if Lawther was brought back. Let's see it. Time for the 3-minute drill. Canadian receiver Ajoa made his Calgary Stampeders debut after serving his 6-game suspension for violating the CFL's gender-based violence and harassment policy following winning the Grey Cup with the Saskatchewan Roughriders in November 2025. How did he look with the Stamps?
I mean, he only made one catch, but I mean, he looks big, he looks physical, he looks enticing and athletic, right? I mean, he can do anything you ask him to do as a blocker, as a pass catcher. So I think he's still knocking off the rust, but it's a nice ad for a Calgary team that, I mean, already had a ton of great Canadian receivers, but that's a really deep unit there. Dante Myers has impressed two-time All-Pro Jamar Chase and Bengals franchise quarterback Joe Burrow during his time in Cincinnati. Can the former Rough Riders receiver stick in the NFL?
It seems like there's a legitimate possibility. And when you have Burrow telling a story about you post-game after you lead the team in receiving yards in your first NFL preseason game, I think that bodes well. To condense it down, Burrow essentially said that he sent a message to Dante Myers about throwing the next day, and Myers got in his car and drove 7 hours to be able to go to that session with Burrow and didn't even really tell him what he was doing until I believe it was after the workout. So Dante Myers seems to be doing, quote, all the little things right in Cincinnati. And when you're getting reps early on in training camp with the ones and Joe Burrow is throwing you passes and telling stories about you, that to me says that your chances of making the roster, be it 53-man active roster or the practice roster, are going up and up and up. 3DownNation.com unveiled our mid-season awards. Were there any selections, though, Hodge, you disagreed with?
I wouldn't say like seriously disagreed with. I would say I did have Trey Vavel on my ballot for most outstanding special teams player. We picked Tyreek McAllister. Vavel has a better punt return average, better kickoff return average, and more long returns than McAllister does in either category. But that being said, I think McAllister would be still a deserving candidate. So I'm sitting on the fence a little bit. But other than that, I thought we nailed all. Star Thomas made his debut with the Saskatchewan Roughriders against Hamilton in Week 11. How do you think the rookie running back looked?
He was pretty good, especially one play in pass protection stood out to me and said, okay, this guy could be a CFL running back. He absolutely decleated Destin Talbert on a halfback blitz from the boundary side. I was like, all right, if he can slide over from the middle of the formation and pick up a defensive back the caliber and speed of Talbot coming off the edge for Trevor Harris to be able to throw a touchdown to Johnny Johnson III, then this kid could probably get it done. He had a key 15-yard catch on that drive as well. I thought perhaps could have even gotten some more carries in that football game, might have helped the offense out. So Star Thomas looked pretty good. Rookie global Alex Hale made all 4 field goals he attempted in Hamilton, including a career-long 52-yarder. He entered the game, Hodge, only making 1 kick of 40 or more yards on the season, but had 3 of them, including that 52-yarder in the game. Should he continue to be the Riders' kicker, or should the Riders put Dawson Hodge in there, or take my idea and trade for Brett Lawther?
I think Alex Hale earned himself another job. I've been very critical of Alex Hale at times, but if you're going to be critical, you got to celebrate the success. He had a great game. He deserves the chance to have another. Curtis Rourke played well in his preseason NFL debut with the San Francisco 49ers, completing 12 of 14 pass attempts for 101 yards and rushing 3 times for 14 yards against the Tennessee Titans. However, the Canadian QB was forced to leave the game with an injury to his ribs in the second quarter. Is the injury serious?
It doesn't seem that way if you believe what head coach Kyle Shanahan told the media postgame. Rourke was taken to the hospital as a precaution after he experienced difficulty breathing. Initial x-rays did not show a broken rib, and he was later discharged. So hopefully that's beneficial for Rourke in his health moving forward. I've been told by people in the know that Rourke has looked really good in training camp out there in San Francisco, and you just look at the way that the Niners rolled out the depth chart there with Rourke starting the game over Adrian Martinez. That tells you he's the leader at the current time to be the number 3 with the 49ers. So if he can stay healthy and keep up those performances, I think he's going to be in San Francisco at least to start the season. The 2027 CFL Combine will be held in Calgary in March at Shouldice Athletic Park and McMahon Stadium from the 11th to the 13th. Are you excited?
I am. I love the draft. I've been to every combine since 2017. Granted, there were a couple years that there were no combines, but still, this will be the 10-year anniversary for me of combines, and I know JC's looking forward to it even more than I am, so it'll be a great time. Last one, Henry Burris is returning to his 3-down football roots for a limited time. The University of Calgary Dinos brought the legendary CFL quarterback in to be a guest coach at training camp from August 14th to 20th. Burris is primarily working with the team's quarterbacks. How cool is that?
That's cool, man. It's always nice to see when CFLers, former CFLers, I should say, and Canadian Football League Hall of Famers are willing to come back and give back to the country that has given them so much. I think that's something that's under talked about, is that a lot of these American guys come up here and get the opportunity to play football when it wasn't happening in the NFL, and really where there's nowhere else that you can go and make legitimate money to have it as a career and to sustain your family and your livelihood. So to see Burris back in Calgary, giving back to the Dinos, helping coach up the quarterbacks, I think is really, really cool. I just want to shout out Darshan Singh. Hopefully I'm saying that properly. He was pushing us, Hodge, to try to get the podcast out on Sunday for that morning commute on Monday. So Darshan, this is for you. And if anybody has any feedback for us, keep it coming. We're trying to be men of the people and keep as many of you as happy as possible. I realize that's not always possible. Jeff, the Calgary Stampeders fan, always just seems like he's upset and grouchy about the Stampeders. Some people don't like Hodge's hats, what have you. But Darshan, great idea. When possible, we will try to do the podcast on Sundays so people can have it in their ear holes on Monday morning.
For Justin Dunk, I'm John Hodge. Thank you as always for listening to the 3DownNation podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to the 3DownNation newsletter. We've also got our betting insight newsletter. These newsletters are 100% free. They get sent to you at no charge with all the latest news, insight, and analysis, everything you need to know about the Canadian Football League and more. We'll see you next time.